All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Django and Postgres. Well, yesterday when we were talking about Docker files and we did our whole intro to Docker, we were able to introduce how to create a Docker container that would be running Postgres on port 5432 on Docker, but port 5433 within our local machine. And currently right now, I believe that container is still running. If we run Docker PS, we can see that our container is actually still running. It was created 23 hours ago. And here we can see the connection. In our local machine, we're connecting our port 5433 to the containers port 5432 within Docker. And that's where we are exposing PostgreSQL. Well, that's great. But now, how do we get that to connect to Django? That's what we'll be covering today. We're going to be starting off our lecture by talking about how to create a Django file first. Once we have Django connected, then we'll go ahead and start breaking down how is it that we can actually connect Django and Postgres within Docker, right? Because they're both going to be living within the Docker environment. They're going to be individual containers running within Docker, and they're not going to be running within our machine. Well, let's go ahead and cover that. Before we start going into how we're gonna create a Django file or a Django Docker file, I apologize, an image and running the container and how to connect everything. Does anyone have any questions over these concepts or how we connected Postgres yesterday from port 5432 to port 5433 within our local machine? All right, if there are no questions, then let's go ahead and start off making our Docker file. So this is the example of yesterday's Docker file. If we look at today's Docker file, it's going to be empty. So just like yesterday we grabbed from Postgres and we grabbed the latest version of Postgres. Now that we want to start a Docker file to create a Django instance, what do we think we want to grab an image from Docker from?
The Django repo on their website.
Yeah, maybe there's a Django repo, right? Maybe we can try that. Let's see. Docker Hub. Let's see if we can find something for Django. And for Django, I only want images. Okay, so it looks like Django has an official image. It didn't used to have one not too long ago, so this is pretty new. Okay, and it seems to have a work directory concept, tells you how to run requirements.txt, and how to run manage py. Well, this is pretty good. It doesn't seem to talk about how you could copy the project. But let's try to take this a step deeper. Rather than utilizing the Django image, we're going to utilize the Python image to make sure that we can alter all the information within Python that we need to in order for this Django to run correctly. So we're going to go ahead and grab from Python. We're going to say from Python. We're going to grab latest version. It's going to bring us straight in. And then from there, we're going to set a couple of environment variables. And these environment variables are more for kind of being able to read Django than anything. So it's going to be Python T write by T code 1. And then the other one is going to be env Python unbuffered 1. So these are just the extra things that we want to make sure that we grab from Python in order for things to work correctly. And then we need to specify a working directory. So where is this working directory going to be from? Well, this working directory is coming in from /project. And we'll go over how this works here shortly. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna run apt get update. So now, yesterday we talked about the difference between virtual machines and a container. But notice we're utilizing apt get or apt to be able to do any of the installs or any of the updates that we need to do. Kind of just how WSL users are doing it, or how we did it during the deployment process, right? Because within this Docker container, we're actually running an Ubuntu instance. Okay. Finally, we're going to go ahead and install, or we're going to run a command to install a couple of things. So here we'll run apt get install. And I'm going to tell that I don't want any of the install recommendations. I just want the necessities to be able to run this information. And then what I want is I want to install GCC and I want to install Postgres QL client. And I believe there's an explanation for this command here. The bottom of our README. There it is. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install. It's going to update the package list. Oh, I apologize. I found it down here. All right, so this part of command installs 2 packages. GCC. So all of this installs 2 packages only. It installs GCC and PostgreSQL client. The -y is going to be to automatically answer yes to any questions that may be prompted during this installment. And then the -- no install recommendations is saying, if any of this asks, hey, do you want, I understand you're installing this. Most people utilize this other thing with this. Would you like to install that as well? We're automatically saying no. And these are the 2 things that we're installing, GCC and PostgreSQL client. And these installments are specifically to let our Django application speak to our PostgreSQL database. All right, so finally, we're going to grab requirements.txt. We're going to copy it. Nope. We want to copy all, we want to tell it where is it that this file is living. So I'm going to tell it within the working directory of project, I want you to find requirements.txt. Okay, finally, we're going to run pip install -- upgrade. Remember, pip is coming within Python. And then we're going to say to pip install -r recursively requirements.txt, which is the file that we just copied. So finally, I'm going to copy all from the root directory. That's going to copy my entire Django project. And then I'm going to expose port 8000, which is where Django is going to be running. So now finally, all I need is to run my command, which is the executable. So I'm going to run Python. I'm going to run manage.py. And that's going to run my server. So I'm essentially just running the server. And instead of leaving it up to default, I'm going to specify what port it will run this server at. Okay. So currently I have Python manage py run server at port 8000. Well, currently none of this exists, right? If I look inside of my directory, I don't actually have a project that it's referencing to. So let's go ahead and start that. Let me go ahead and create a virtual environment. Or actually, I already have one, so I'm just going to grab that one. And then I'm going to do pip freeze requirements.txt. That's going to create a requirements.txt, but I just realized it's living in the wrong directory. And now let's go ahead and start our Django project. So let's go Django admin, start project. And let's just call it to do project. Okay, so now we see the to do project is here. We can move requirements txt into our to do project so that it's within the proper directory. And now let's revise these commands. Okay, so we're telling Python to go into latest. We're setting some Python variables here. And we're telling the Python work directory to go into project. But project doesn't exist. The only thing that exists within this directory is to do project. So I'm going to tell it to open up to do project. So it's going to open it up. And then I wanted to update its installation package. I wanted to install what I need to, in order to be able to talk to PostgreSQL. And then I'm going to tell it to copy requirements txt from within the to do project. Right, so it's going to look inside of the to do project. It's going to find requirements txt and copy it. After that, it's going to install all of my requirements. And if this is successful, because I want to make sure that my requirements are successfully installed, and that's why I have this in two separate steps, then I'm going to copy all of these files, meaning it will copy manage py, and it will copy the directory to do project with all of the files within it. After that, I'll expose port 8000, and then I'll run my server. Does anyone have any questions over this? Okay, if there are no questions for me, then I have a question for everyone. Why did I do copy my requirements txt, install all of my requirements prior to just installing or copying my entire project?
Because this is going to live in the container, hosted container and not on the local machine. So you've got to copy that over and then run the stuff you would need that's in your virtual environment on the local machine. So it's all there and present in the container, hosted container.
Nice. Yeah. And then just remember that the reason why I copied requirements txt first is because I want to make sure that all of my requirements are being able to successfully installed rather than just going straight into copying my entire project and getting an unexpected error somewhere else. Okay, great. So now I have all that information. I'm able to run this. And this is what I currently have right now. I have Docker running one Postgres machine. Or one Postgres container, I apologize. Well, now I created a Docker file. And same thing like yesterday, I want to create an image and then a container so that I can add a container here that's going to be hopefully talking to Postgres shortly. Well, let's get into that. Let's go ahead and build this Docker image. So I'm going to go ahead and say Docker build -t Django image. I'm just going to call it Django image. And then I'm going to do it within this file. Okay, so we can see that I was able to find it. It failed because it tried to find requirements txt and it couldn't find it. Failed to calculate checksum for, yep, saying requirements txt not found. Okay. Well, let me make sure that I have a requirements txt here. I believe that's spelled correctly. It's the same way I have it spelled back here. Okay, so I did spell it correctly. All right, but it's unable to find it. Interesting. Hmm. Still failing at requirements txt. Working directory to do project. Huh. Let's see. Something within these directions isn't adding up. I am telling it the proper working directory, which is project. And then I am copying the requirements txt file into my container, but it's just not able to find it. I wonder if there's just a spelling error. Let's see. If I comment out the requirements txt information, will it still work properly? Okay, it's grabbing the get, it's installing with no recommendations. Okay, so it seems like the image was able to build correctly. If I run docker image ls, we should be able to see that docker image. So there's my Django image. It was able to build correctly, but didn't work the way I wanted it to. So let me go ahead and remove that Docker image. And I want to make sure I have the correct command here. Okay, so we're going to copy the ID here for that Docker image, and then I'm going to remove it with Docker image, or excuse me, Docker RMI for remove image. Then I'm going to pass in the ID. Okay, and now I'm just going to ask Docker image ls. And now we can see that the Django API is gone. Now my Postgres container is showing up. I don't know why it wasn't showing up yesterday, but now it is. That's great. So now we can see that we have there's something going on here where we were able to run this script as long as we didn't ask it to copy requirements txt. But the moment we ask it to copy requirements txt, we get an error. And it looks like here's the error. It looks like I need a slash at the end of that dot. At least that's what I can see from here. And everything else seems to be pretty much the same. So let's try to build this Docker image one more time. It seems to have problems finding requirements txt for some reason.
Does it need the working directory part above that copy requirements in the documentation?
Well, working directories here. Oh, I see what you mean. Like you're saying, like move it down.
Yeah, maybe, because Python does like that, things in order.
I also see that they have like an absolute path. So I wonder if I need an absolute path as well. It's really having problems with that requirements txt. Let's see. What could this be from? Well, we may have to call, I may have to get back to you all on the requirements txt portion. I don't want to waste too much time trying to debug that because we do have quite a bit more to show today. So let's go ahead and continue on with the process. Let me make sure that this is running correctly. I'm gonna build this image one more time. Once this image is built, which it is now, so I can run Docker image ls. We can see that 5 seconds ago, we created our Django image. So now let's actually run this container, right? We have an image now. We were able to create an image, but now we want to create a container from said image. And I want this container to be linked to my computer's port. So I'm going to link this to my port 8000. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say Docker run. I'm going to run it in daemon mode. I'm going to link my local machines port 8000 to my containers port 8000. And then I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to name it maybe API. And I know that it's coming from my Django image, which I forgot what that was called. Let's see, Docker image ls. The name that I gave it is Docker underscore image, or sorry, Django underscore image. Okay, so now we can see that that's running. If I run Docker ps, okay, so there's some sort of error, right? Because when I try to compile this, it says that it attempted to do it, but it failed, right? It's not running. The only thing that I see running is Postgres. So I wonder what's going on. How can I debug this? Interesting. I must have done some sort of spelling error. I just copied and pasted exactly what I have on the README. I know that there's no such thing as project, so I need to change this to do project. Requirements txt is right in there. So now let me clear this. Let me go ahead and actually. Oh, that works. Let me go ahead and run this image. So Docker images ls. Oh, Docker image ls. We can see that here's the Django image. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I'm going to build an image. And I'm going to do it by running this Docker file. Okay, having a problem recognizing requirements txt.
We'll put something in the chat.
Oh, looks like the syntax and copy requirements txt path to requirements. Huh. So you're saying like an absolute path to requirements? There it is. Yeah, it looks like the copy command needed an absolute path to requirements. Let's see. Run pip install -r requirements txt. Did not complete successfully. Exit code 1. No matching distribution found for PsychoPG binary. That's a new one. And it's probably because we're using the new version of PsychoPG. So maybe we need to change the PsychoPG binary. Let's see. Okay, so I just installed Psycho PG2. I'm gonna pip freeze requirements.txt. Okay, so now I have requirements.txt, and if I look for Psycho PG, here's Psycho PG2. I'm gonna remove the information regarding Psycho PG3 because it looks like that's causing us a problem. And I'm just gonna stick to Psycho PG2 for now. Okay, there's installing all of my requirements.txt. Looks like it's gonna run successfully this time, hopefully. Okay, so now I ran successfully. I can run Docker image ls. And now I can see that I created my Django. So there's my Django image now. I can clear this. Now that Django image is running, I can go ahead and build the Django image. Oh, sorry, run the Django image. I apologize. Because you build an image from a file, but then you run a container from the image. Okay, so now run a container at port 8000, port 8000 with the name of API, and I know that the image that I want to utilize is Django. Okay, so there seems to be a problem. You have to remove or rename that container. Okay, so now Docker PS. I don't have that container, but if I run Docker PS -a, okay, there it is. So I didn't remove that container, so it was sharing the same name. So now I have to figure out how to remove that one specific container. Okay, which is Docker remove, so RM, and then the container ID. So now Docker PS -a shows me only Postgres running, okay? And now I can finally go ahead and run that port command. And let me actually add the --rm argument here so that I can remove it as soon as I stop it. Okay, let's run Docker PS. Interesting. Let's see if I can go to localhost. Okay, so that's localhost 8000. It's currently not working. My Django application isn't running, and I am not 100% sure what or why it is not running. Okay, so let me go ahead and take a look at the logs here, because I believe that that's something that we can do here. We can take a look at the Docker log. Yep, and we can do that by passing the container's ID. So let me Docker PS. Okay, it seems to not want to run, and I believe that that's because I passed the RM flag. So let me remove that. If I run Docker PS -a, now we can see that Django is there. And if I run PS, it is not running. So here's Django. Here's my container ID. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to figure out what went wrong by asking for the logs regarding this one container. Oh, it's Docker logs. Okay, so the problem was that it can't open the file to do project manage.py. No such file or directory. So it couldn't find to do project. Interesting. So it could be because of this copy path. Maybe this working directory isn't working the way I thought it would. So here. Let me go ahead and remove that Docker instance. I'm going to build that Docker image one more time. All right, and let's try it this time. Maybe this time, what is this, like fifth or seventh time? Maybe seventh time's the charm. Let's see, we want a Docker build -t Django. It's going to be in here. Okay, it looks like it worked properly. At least that's what it's telling me. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this Docker. So let's do Docker run -d at port 8000. Linking it to my own port 8000 with the name of API at Django. Okay, now we have it running. So now Django is actually running. It was set up. It's linked to port 8000. Here's my local machine. When I refresh this, I get my Django rocket coming from my actual Docker container. All right, so now, not only do I have a PostgreSQL instance running within my Docker, but I also have Django, which is running at port 8000. Okay, that's great. I almost have my backend connected, all right? But currently, even though I got this running, it's not actually talking to Postgres just yet. Well, we need to fix that. And we actually don't fix that through Docker. We fix that by telling Django where to find our database. Remember, all of our containers are living within the same environment. So they can talk to one another. They just need to be able to find each other. When we run Django on our local machine and tell it to talk to Postgres, it's able to find Postgres pretty easily because it doesn't have a problem being able to find where it's being hosted. It's coming from the local host. Well, in Docker, that's not the case. In Docker, we need to specify a little bit further how it works whenever we go ahead and talk to our database. So let's talk about that. So first of all, we know we're not going to be utilizing SQLite. We're going to be utilizing PostgreSQL. So that's the one thing that we need to change first. Next, we know that we're going to be utilizing to-do DB. Now, how do I know that? Because if I look at my Postgres Docker file, that is what I named my database, right? I named it to-do DB. And I'm actually going to put this side by side. That way I have access to it. Okay, great. Well, now we're going to need a couple of other arguments that we need to specify in order to be able to access this database. For example, now the user is different. So I need to specify that the user is now Francisco. I need to specify that the password is FR. Then I need to specify the host, which we will go into here shortly. And finally, we need to specify the port, which we know that the port that we are exposing is 5432. So at this host, we can find port 5432. Well, now what would the host name be? Well, the host name, if we take a look here, here is Postgres. Now, what is the name that I gave this actual, there's the image and then the name that I gave this actual container. Well, the name that I gave this container is Postgres. So here within host, I can actually reference it as Postgres. And that will connect me to this database. Well, now this will connect me to the database here, right? That allows Django to connect to the database. But currently these two containers don't know that they can talk to each other. So now I need to tell these containers that they can talk to each other by changing the command that I use to run the container for Django. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to docker stop Django. Error response from daemon, no such container as Django. That's a lie. Django's right there. Oh no, that's the image. I named it API. Okay, so docker stop API. All right, so now API has been stopped. And now I'm going to build it one more time. So I'm going to say docker run -d. Same thing. I'm going to link port 8000 to my local machines port 8000. But now I also want it to have, I still want to give it a name. I apologize, which is API. But now I also want it to run with Django or to work with the database, right? Ooh, and let's actually name this DB. I apologize. Well, now, whenever we go to link something or link to containers, we can utilize the --link argument. And what this is going to do is it's going to take two arguments. One, the name of the container that I want to link. And two, the host name that I want to utilize. So this is where DB is coming from. All right, so if we take a look here, I can run docker ps. We can see that in docker ps, I have the name of Postgres. And actually, it's docker rm API. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So now we know that Postgres does exist. We're giving it the host name of DB so that it can connect to our database. And then after that, we're just telling it what image to use. And in this case, we're utilizing the Django image. Okay. Now, when I run this, this is still going to fail, right? Because in our Django image is not holding these updates that we just created. So now that we just made an update to Django, we have to actually rebuild the entire image and then run it. So let's docker rmi Django. That's going to remove the image. Let's build this image one more time. So docker build -t Django. And I think that's all that I need. Yes, that is all that I need. And then I'm going to do it from here. Okay, that worked. So now let's build it with the command that we had just talked about. So now we're going to run at the said port with the name API, and we're going to link it to Django. Ooh. Invalid reference format. Interesting. Doesn't seem to like my pasting. Okay. And now if I run docker ps, well, now we can see that Django is connected to our database. Now we can't necessarily see it here, right? Because if I just refresh, it's just going to show me the same thing. But if I wanted to take this a step further and build some models and a response, which we can really quick, let's go ahead and make this project a little bit more extensive. Let's go into to-do project. Let's make a quick app. I don't know. Let's just say example for now. Same thing as before, we just want to add an example. Let's say that this model and example app, I guess task app would have been better, right? We should just name it task app. Yeah, let's do that. Python manage PY, start app, task app. Oh. Okay, there you go. So now I have my task app, right? Well, let's say that in my task app, I want to create a model. So now let's go with class, task, models.model. This is just going to have a title, which is going to be a models.char field. I'm not going to give it a max length or anything like that. I'm going to give it a completed field. And that's going to be a Boolean field that's going to be default to false. Okay, and then finally, let's go ahead and create a views here. I'm not going to go into serial. Oh, I guess I should serialize everything. So let's create a serializers.py from REST framework dot serializers, import model serializer, and then from dot models, import task class task serializer. Going to be a model serializer. The meta should have, is that correct? Is it class meta? If somebody could give me a hand on the syntax, that would be great. Yes, class meta. Okay, perfect. So we have class meta, we have our model, which is task, and we're going to grab all of the fields. So now that's all been serialized. Here we're going to quickly grab all the things from REST framework that we need, which I believe in this case will be API view and response. Okay, and now we can have class, all tasks, take in API view. It's going to take in all of the serialized response. So let's go ahead and say, oh, probably want to import it. Okay, so now we're going to say that all tasks, maybe I should just name it tasks, is equal to task serializer. And the data that is going to be taken is going to be task.objects.all, where many is equal to true. Okay, and then all I'm going to do is return a response of tasks.data. And this is a get method. Okay, so now we have all of this. Everything's good to go. Let's go ahead and make some migrations here. I guess we don't need to do that here. We could just do that within our Django application here. Let's go ahead and ask, let's add a couple of fixture data actually. So let me create a folder named fixtures. Within fixtures, I'm going to add a file called task.data.json. And let's ask ChatGPT to quickly provide to us some example information for this model. Is in JSON, we provide the fixture with 10 examples for the following model. That's it, send it. All right, let's see what it does. Okay, so there it is giving me my 10 examples. You can see that it's giving me your app name, which is fine. We could change that here shortly. And everything else seems pretty good. It gives me whether it's completed or it's true, and it just gives me random task 1, task 2, and task 3. So now I can copy this information, paste it here, and then I'm just going to change your app name for task app. Okay. Now we have all this information. That's great. But how do we actually get all of this to show up within our container? Well, now we have to rebuild our image. We know that much. So we could actually go inside of our Docker file and tell Docker which commands to run. Right? So there's a difference between execute and the commands to run. So let's start all over, build our Docker image, and then build our Docker container. So again, I'm going to run Docker PS. I see that we have Django or API. I'm going to say Docker stop API. I'm going to tell it to remove API. I'm going to say Docker RMI Django, and that's going to get rid of Django. And I'm just going to run the same commands. I'm going to rebuild my image with my new changes because I need to copy what my project currently looks like, right? So now let me go ahead and Docker build -t. I want to grab Django from this file. I am in the wrong directory, aren't I? Yep. Okay, so now I was able to build my Docker file. I now have a Docker image named Django. I can run Docker image ls. There's Django. All right, now I can build. So Docker build. Oh, sorry, run. I always get those two mixed up. And now I can tell it that I want to run it in daemon mode. I want to enter port 8000. I want to link it to port 8000. I want to give it the name of API. And I want to link Postgres to DB as host. And then finally, I'm going to be utilizing the Django image. If I run Docker PS now, I should see Django. And you know what? I just realized I messed up because we do not currently have, but you know what? I can still demonstrate it. I didn't make the URL endpoint to be able to shoot this, but we can still demonstrate it by inspecting the database. Well, what I'm trying to show everyone now is that we can actually run commands within Django. Even though it's running, my server is running, I can still have it run specific commands. For example, I can have it make migrations. So now I can say Docker execute. Where I'm going to execute this at is going to be in my Docker container of API. And I'm going to tell it to Python manage.py make migrations. Okay, so there it tells me that it was able to make a migration, right? That looks exactly the same. Finally, I'm going to migrate. And if the communication to my database is working properly, then it'll be able to migrate. Now we can see that everything migrated. Now, yesterday, we covered how to enter our Postgres container. Well, let's just do that one more time. And I believe the command that we utilized, let me see. How to pass in user and password to pSQL. Here it is. Okay, so here's the command that we utilized. Again, we're going to go ahead and pass in PG password. We're going to make that equal to FR. Going to specify that we're using SQL to the user of Francisco. We're going to specify the host, which in this case, I believe the host is 5433. we're gonna specify, oh, excuse me, the host is localhost. And the port is 5433. And I believe that is it, but let me make sure by checking our curriculum notes here. Oh, and then I have to specify the name of the database, which I believe in this case, the database was ToDoDB. Okay, great. So now I'm within my database that's living inside of my container. And I can run /d to see all of the different tables created by Django. And we can see that task is now in there. Well, now I can also have it load data. So load data task dot, is it tasks data.json, I believe. Let me make sure. To do project, task, fixtures, and it's actually task, not tasks. Okay, so task data.json. Okay, so now it installed it. So now if I go into pSQL and I run select all from tasks, we can see that all of the tasks from my JSON data has now been installed within my container. And if I have a path, I can actually run it and be able to get the response through Django REST frameworks. I don't currently have a path, but let's actually make that change. We have enough time. We have 7 minutes. We can make that change, update all of our information, and then quickly get this running again so that we have the correct path running. So we've seen the process of me making an update quite a bit. So I'm gonna have all of you walk me through making this new update, right? So where do I start? How do I make the update to actually creating a URL route that will trigger this API response that we just created within this views? So I just want to send a GET request, right? And that GET request needs to get routed to this proper API view. How do I do that?
Do you do the URL thing?
Yeah, I just need to go to URLs, right? So I need to go to do project. I need to go to URLs. And we could honestly do the simplest way of doing it, which is going to be to grab the task app. And to just import all tasks directly. So that we could just name a path named tasks. I know that our usual, and actually let's do it. API/v1/tasks. And let's just grab all tasks as v. Okay. So that's going to do the trick. That should be able to send a request and return a response. Well, now, how do I actually get it to run within Docker? So we just made an update to the Django application, right? Since we made an update to Django, we probably need to rebuild this entire image. Then we need to run a container from said image. So we already have the file built out. How do I build this file into an image?
Docker build -t API. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah, so we're calling our container API and then we're just gonna call the image Django.
Okay. Was that it, or is there more to that?
We just need to tell it the path. So in this case, it's within here.
Oh, the dot, all right.
Okay, great. So now we were able to run it. We have an image. Now, how do I make that image run a container that's linked to Postgres?
Docker run /D for background, daemon mode, /P, and then the ports, 8,000 and 8,000,
All right.
and then name it API.
Nice. Yeah, and then we just want to link it to Postgres at DB. And then we want to name this, or we want to tell it which image it's using, which in this case, it's Django. Now we run Docker PS. We can see API and Postgres are running. Let's make sure that we have these migrations. So exec IT at API, Python manage py, make migrations, Python manage py, or sorry. Now I just want to make sure that everything has been migrated. So I'm just going to do migrate, but it should be there's nothing to apply. Okay, perfect. So everything is good. Now, finally, the server is running, right? When I refresh this, now we're going to get it not found because I have a route. But if I go to API v1 tasks, interesting. Template does not exist because it does not have a template. But here, let's do it through Thunder client. So now it's actually showing me all the information that I need. I ran a GET request and it returned the proper information. The reason why I'm getting this template does not exist in the front end is because I made a mistake when I imported my task app or when I created my view. If we take a look here, I imported response from REST framework.views, and it was supposed to be imported from REST framework.response. And this response is the one that comes with the template render, while the one from views does not. All right. So now we officially created a Django API that's able to run containerized with a link between Postgres and Django. Both of these are talking to each other. The database is successfully working, and we can run API requests to talk to our Django models, grab serialized data, and return a response. All right, that was a lot of information. At this point, does anyone have any questions over everything that I just did? And I apologize for rushing it, but I try to keep these classes to an hour in order to respect your guys' personal project time. Okay, if there are no questions for me, then I have a question for everyone. Why is it that every time I made a change to my Django project, I had to rebuild everything? I had to get rid of my container, I had to get rid of my image, and I had to build my image one more time and then run my container. To answer your question, Brian, no, there was not. The only dependency that I had to update or change was PsychoPG3 to PsychoPG2. It's likely just not supported within Docker just yet.
is like rebuilding the Docker images or containers, like making migrations and migrating to the actual Docker itself.
Uh, kind of. The main reason why we had to rebuild everything is because of this copy command, right? We're copying the existing file, what's already existing, but we only copy it there in that one instance when we run that command through the terminal. Any updates that we make don't exist within Docker, right? They are independent from one another. Those updates that we make are happening on our local machine, not within Docker. So in order to be able to render those updates, we have to restart. We have to remove the image, we have to remove the container, rebuild the image so that this copy command is triggered again, and it grabs all the information, all the updated information, and then builds the actual container out of that image. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. All right. With that said, that's going to conclude our lecture. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.